Welcome to the Postpartum Performance Podcast. If you're here to be empowered and encouraged, you're in the right place. I believe every woman deserves to learn who's in her corner, which is why this podcast was created, to share encouragement and intentional conversations around women's health, nutrition, and wellness for new mothers. In each episode, we will discuss ways for women to find truth for her health, to feel strong, and to be confident from the inside out. I'm your host, Dr. Lindsay Peczkowski, a performance physical therapist with a passion for teaching others about pelvic health and guiding mothers to build movement, confidence, and strength. I'm a lover of running and weightlifting and a healthy cooking enthusiast. All right, ladies, grab your coffee and settle in for an episode of the Postpartum Performance Podcast. Are you with me? Here we go. All right. Welcome to the Postpartum Performance Podcast. Today on the show, we have Dr. Jen Parker of Embody Wellness PT. So excited to get her on because we have connected through the interwebs of social media, and she's in California as well, but a little bit farther from each other. And I'm just super excited about the stuff that she is doing right now for women and for moms, especially. So I would love for you to share a little bit about first yourself personally and a little bit professionally, and what you're excited about right now.
Okay, cool. Thanks for having me on, Dr. Lindsay. Yeah, it's funny. I feel like we definitely connected over Instagram, but I don't think it was like about pelvic health in particular. I think I saw you like post, I think you were posting like coffee stuff. I'm like, oh my God.
It was coffee shops.
Yeah. I'm like, I missed that coffee because I lived in San Diego. I went to San Diego State. And then I went to University of St. Augustine. So I lived in San Diego for about 10 years and I just missed like all of that. And then I just kind of noticed from there that we had so much in common. Like your husband's also a PT and you guys work together. Me and my husband don't yet, hopefully someday. But so I'm a physical therapist. I specialize in pelvic health and I work in Livermore, California. So I'm about 35 miles east of San Francisco. So I primarily work with postpartum women during pregnancy, but I mean, I see men, I see women that are I think my youngest right now is 16 and my oldest is 85. Awesome. And so a lot of pelvic pain conditions. And that's primarily what I do is that. And for sure, a big part of my practice too is kind of a more, I guess I'm calling it a holistic approach, but just, sleep hygiene techniques. Like, I feel like when people come in, we're talking a ton, just about their overall general health and how are they eating? Like those sort of things are like massive in my practice as well. Currently I work inside of a Pilates studio. So I just rent out a space there. The Pilates studio is still closed due to COVID. So hopefully she'll be able to open back up relatively soon. But yeah, she also works with prenatal postpartum women. So we've been able to collaborate really, it's been a really nice relationship. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Awesome. And personally, what are you up to right now? Cause I feel like you have some important things you're working on right now.
So I'm a new business owner. I just opened my practice technically July, but full on in September, October of last year. But I signed up for a full distance triathlon. And that
is this your first one?
So it's my first full.
Okay.
I've done a couple half Ironmans. People are like, "Oh, you've done an Ironman?" I'm like, no, I have not done an Ironman. I've done a half. It's half. It's very different. But yeah, so I'm waking up early to train for that. But I think the biggest thing is I've been just structuring my day a lot better so that I can create space to even get into that, mentally and physically. Yeah. So it's been more of nutrition, training myself to, cut out some of that added sugar stuff. So I'm not so tired and just waking up earlier, making my schedule a little bit easier on myself so that I'm not grinding so much. So a lot of those little things so that I can, be able to actually train and not be so burnt out. So that's where I'm at right now. That it's not till October. So I have some time.
Awesome. Yeah. That's so good. I want to do a start with a sprint try at some point, but we'll see when that happens. I've done more of the running stuff. I've done a marathon and some things, but I'm intrigued by the triathlon stuff. I like having other things to train for instead of just running.
You're in the right place. I think my husband did his first one in Solana Beach. He did the like sprint tri down there.
Okay.
And then, yeah, there's so many down there. It's like I think that's like the birthplace of triathlon is San Diego.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
The Mecca.
Yeah.
So awesome. Well, so Jen, I'm just excited to have you on the show because you, especially recently, there's been kind of within pelvic health, there's kind of like little like niche areas within pelvic health. So there's kind of like the pelvic pain, there's kind of that postpartum side of things, and there's just like other women's health stuff. But there's kind of this new upcoming category, I think, that's becoming more like popular, but also needed. And it's more with like labor prep and things like that, which you are doing some classes right now to offer to some of your patients and people in the community. And I just find it so interesting because I think a lot of people don't necessarily fit PT into that stage of life for someone. And how we're kind of building traction on the postpartum side of things where we can definitely fit that box. But I was curious what got you interested in kind of diving more into the birth prep, labor prep side of things within when you were working with women that were like the postnatal, prenatal, and all of that type of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I think it all mostly started with seeing these women postpartum and just starting to see what they were experiencing, symptoms like prolapse and, pain, significant, and not seeing them for years later after these symptoms, and just them constantly saying like, I really wish I knew this stuff before. Like, I wish I would have known this information. I wish I would have known you, just stuff like that. And, in body wellness, I really, really push for a wellness mindset. And I think a lot of times we think of PT traditionally as rehab. Mm-hmm. And so what I was like, what can I do to make this information a little bit easier for someone to access? And so I've decided to put together classes that are, I call it the Empowered Birth Workshop. But it's meant to be like a little bit lower of a price point for someone if they're just like not quite able to, come in for that one-on-one visit. I have done birth prep one-on-one for people before. But this is kind of a little bit different, I guess, just because it's more of a group setting. And I get the partners to come in. So, and really like, I felt really knowledgeable in a lot of that, even without necessarily taking a ton of extra coursework. Like I really understood pelvic floor, like how how we move it, how we can connect to it, hip opening, things like that. So I did end up taking like a pregnancy course through Herman Wallace that did touch on some birth prep, but a lot of it was just my own like researching. And a lot of it actually came from the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, so ACOG, just going straight from what they recommend. And just educating these moms on what our own, our own gynecological or OB-GYNs are really recommending, but aren't quite implementing yet. Just educating them on what their choices are so that they have this like informed choice once they go in. So, and then finding that, we really know that the more like empowered somebody goes in to their birth, the better birth, like the better they feel about their birth, no matter like their outcome necessarily. So that's kind of, where it all stemmed from, was just more of this, I got to see these people before, just to give them some of this information because they really are asking for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think during that time too, I think even taking like other birth classes or different things, you get some information. Obviously they're loaded with other information, but some of the stuff on more of like the orthopedic musculoskeletal side of things, or for just like how your body's going to react and respond, and how it's just a little bit from a different lens. And I love that you're bringing that to these mothers, because again, to be able to empower them during that time, and just to give them, and like their partner too, to let them know like, hey, you could have a role in this, or like you can be like reminding them of maybe this is a better strategy, or like different things. Cause I'm sure in the moment it's harder to remember some of that stuff, but to have someone else there to keep them accountable. So some of the stuff I wanted to talk about was for breathing during childbirth and during that labor. Because we were talking about this beforehand, that like, I think we all kind of have this picture in our head of like the movies where there's, a pretty intense scene and she's just like either screaming or like blue in the face, and it just, that doesn't have to be your birth story. And so I would love for you to expand on how breathing during labor plays a role, and how kind of changing your breathing mechanics really can really make a difference for that.
Yeah. Yeah. So some of the stuff, the breathing that we talk about in the birth prep class too, there's different types of breathing. So we have, there's breathing in the earlier stages of labor, which is more of this kind of looking for more of a calming type of breathing potentially, where it's more for a pain management. I see a lot of women who they either want to really delay the ability to use like an epidural as long as they possibly can, or they want to like labor at home for as long as they can. Or even they're just looking to try just to have a completely home birth. So having these breath techniques just to help kind of calm our entire body down can be really, really helpful during to manage pain. And actually it's been found to be very helpful to manage pain. It's just not widely used or incorporated, but when individuals are using it, it's been found to be moderately or very helpful. And then during actual like pushing phase, right, or like that delivery phase, there's different types of breathing. I think that's what we're getting back at with, like, I just watched This Is Us actually this week, and there was lots of births happening, and I was like, oh goodness, like here we go again. But basically one of the things that like makes it really kind of easy to understand and grasp is if we're holding tension in general, like in our jaw, is a good place to think of this, because a lot of us are like jaw clenchers. But if we're holding tension like in our jaw, then our pelvic floor muscles are probably doing the same thing. They're probably holding tension. So if I am just clenching my teeth, clenching my body, you might even be able to feel like, I actually feel like a lot of squeezing happening down there. So that's a lot of times when we're coached to push, we're kind of literally moms will come in and be like, oh, the nurses just told me like to hold my breath and push, which that is that's called a closed glottis pushing technique. And that is utilized sometimes with labor. And it can be a really helpful technique, but it shouldn't be the only technique that we're coached with. There's also something called open glottis pushing, where it's literally just, I'm exhaling as I'm getting this downward pressure. It is similar to having a bowel movement. It's like, that's kind of a lot of PTs are like, don't say that. But in a way, like it can be if I have a bowel movement correctly. And that's the problem, is a lot of people strain to have their bowel movements. So that's one of the things I really try to teach in my class is feeling this downward movement. And as I'm exhaling, it's a little bit, I'm using my core to help me do that. And then just reminding women that like, our uterus is doing a ton of the work. Our job is to kind of ultimately relax a little bit. And so that's some of the different breathing techniques that we go over. Some other things are even things like panting, animal noises. Like there's a lot of research out there that just talks about like our natural, like when we're birthing, we're like in mammalian brain, like we're like in our deep brain. That's why I love having the birth partners come to my class, because they're the birth partners are using the frontal cortex. Like they're the ones that like are helping to make decisions. And I want those moms to communicate, or those birthing people to communicate beforehand as best as they can, to have these like, goals, so that the mom or the birth person doesn't have to switch out of mammalian brain. They stay there. And so we have these like animal-like noises that literally will happen. And that's actually very normal. And so we'll talk about things like that too. We don't necessarily practice all of them, but I just educate that like that might be something your body naturally is just looking for.
That's so good. Yeah. That's so good, because the education piece is like gold. I found with pelvic health, with physical therapy in general, a lot of what we do is education and being able to empower and encourage of like your options or what else you can do. And I just think that's so important, especially in an area that sometimes people think there's only one way, or they're like, well, this is what I thought I was supposed to do, or this is what I heard my friend did, or something like that, but having like sound information. So I love that. The other thing I was curious about was so some of the, like, I wish I would have known sooner, which I love asking this to all of the guests, because especially working with women a lot, I know you see kind of a mixture, but a lot of women, regardless of age, but even just specifically into more kind of like the prenatal, postnatal population. What is, if not you, if you already kind of explained it too, but what is the, I wish I would have known sooner for those women?
Yeah. So some of them are like another topic that comes up a lot in birth prep. And like, I just actually had a mom come in and she's already had 2 babies, but she wanted to kind of have like, she called it like, just like some reminders or just a review. And so it was interesting just to hear a lot of her like feedback. Well, the doctor said I can't do this, or I couldn't do that before. And then you hear this other mom say, oh, well, the place that I'm birthing at said that what Jen's talking about is actually totally fine. So there's like these like problems going on within hospital systems, not quite being on the same page as each other. But again, it comes down to just like educating the mom and letting her kind of gear, or the birth partner too, gear the direction they want to go. But one of the things that I hear a lot is that once moms or birthing people get into the hospital and get administered, even if they do or don't get an epidural, like they're on their backs almost the entire time. And so there was one study that found that once women or birthing people are in, that once they're admitted, that only 40% of them never get back up off of their back. So they're in basically one position the whole time. And the problem, especially laboring on your back or birthing completely on your back, is that the sacrum gets stiff. It doesn't move very much when you're in that position. So it's there can increase the likelihood of things like perennial tears, or even just really elongated, especially that later stage of labor. And even ACOG really recommends being upright during labor. So that can help a lot for getting baby to move down, and just getting movement in general. Yeah, totally. And so that's a huge one. Even things like if you have an epidural, laying on your side, even getting on, I saw this beautiful picture of a woman. She was flipped onto her, like kind of the opposite way. So where the headrest was, she was flipped around that way. But a lot of the times, like a doctor or nurse might say like, no, you can't do that. But really what they're saying is that like, I don't know if you're safe to do that. And if you and your birth partner are like comfortable with doing that, you are allowed to do it. It's not like, I highly doubt that there's this huge hospital policy that says it. So I think that's a big thing, is that we're staying on our backs. And then the other, a lot of it is just like, I'm not really sure what happened during my birth. And so I'm like the first person that they're sitting and telling their birth story to. And we're kind of figuring out together, like what was probably going on at that time. And so just even educating, like, hey, something that can be super helpful after you have your birth is telling your birth story, like writing it down. And that's one of my favorite books is The Fourth Trimester by Kimberly Ann Johnson. And there's a lot that she talks a lot about really resting and like really going back in and think and writing out. And if there was something that you didn't really like about, or if there was something about your birth story that you didn't totally agree with, actually literally writing what you wish happened or wanted to happen can be really helpful just to kind of keep moving forward. So I will literally just sit there and listen to people's stories and try to help them understand why. Like for example, one woman was telling me like, I was pushing and the nurse kept saying like, you're doing great, but the head wasn't going any farther. She was, she kept saying like, you're doing great, but nothing was changing because the baby wasn't coming out farther. And I was then like, well, actually, maybe what was happening is the baby's head was spinning a little bit in the right direction, even though it wasn't coming out farther. And she's like, oh, I never thought of it like that. And just like understanding that helped her a ton to understand what was going on during that time.
Yeah.
So
that's so good.
Yeah.
That's so good. Especially with, I like what you said about being able to like write down some of that stuff. Cause I think a lot of people will have this vision of like what they want their birth to look like. And sometimes it turns out that way. Sometimes it doesn't. But being able to reflect on it and to process that, cause there's so many things changing, but also during that time, it's like, well, you can't see everything that's going on, or like, you don't really know.
Yeah.
And so being able to to write that out and process that and to let some things go if you need to, or to really just like understand like what was going on. So that's really good.
Mm-hmm.
That's so good. So we were talking about, so like laying on your back is not necessarily ideal per se, or especially for like that entire time. So side lying's a good one. And then any other positions or anything with like leg position. Cause I know that some certain leg positions, from kind of what I've heard and seen, that certain leg positions can be better. And with the position of like the hip and the sacrum and the kind of how things are working, that there's certain positions that might be better than others if possible.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think it kind of depends on the person, which is why I love birth preps so much, is because you can really try out some of these positions beforehand. Cause I think it's 15% of women that labor or have a baby end up with labral tears. Like it's a huge thing where labral tears occur. Yeah. So, and part of that could be like, because I have an epidural, I can't really feel very well. And I have someone holding my legs for me. And I didn't notice that like it was in a weird position. I think a lot of them go like undiagnosed labral tears, but anyways, so some of my favorite, I love having tools to help support you. So, I love the hands and knees supported position. Like I have like a physio ball that we'll practice with, and we'll kind of lean onto that. I almost call it like a modified child's pose. So I'm kind of like on my knees, but supported that way. That tends to be a really comfortable position for people. You can also hold onto a grab bar that way too, if they have them. Most hospitals have them. I feel like a lot of times you have to ask for them. But they have, so something to hold on to and just be supported forward. I love peanut balls. They're like they're like those big Swiss balls, and they're like squeezed in the middle. So they look like a peanut. Yeah. They're great for side lying, or even if you were, kind of sitting upright and have just one of your legs propped up and open. That could be really nice. Cause we still want moms to like be able to rest through some of this too. If we're constantly in these like, on our hands and knees, not really in supported positions, then it's more taxing, and like, it's going to be a day or two of labor. Right. So, really having things to support you are good. And it really depends on the person. And so yeah, we want to practice a lot of those before. And I actually, in the birth prep class, get the dads to do all of the same, because I have a lot of the times the dad's supporting the mom's legs and like having them communicate on what feels comfortable. And then I literally have them switch, and I have the dad lay down and do the same thing, so that they can just feel like, oh, that is weird and kind of uncomfortable if I do that. Or this feels really good. So that's really helpful. There is some other information out there about the hip position. So like hip internal rotation versus hip external rotation. So if you think of like your sit bones, if you are in a hip internal rotated position, then my sit bones technically move away from each other slightly. It's not this like huge thing. And then if I go into hip external rotation, my sit bones come in towards each other a little bit more. So depending on like where I am in my labor, hip in external rotation may be a little bit more helpful to get the baby to come down a little bit more, because I'm opening the top, the pelvic like inlet. And then as the baby's coming through, the opening the outlet. So hip internal rotation may be a little bit more helpful too. Now we know, like with orthopedic wise, sometimes hip internal rotation can be impinging for women. I mean, external rotation too. So that's again why I really like trying it out before, so that you can feel, because it is a lot harder. There's a lot going on during that day. So
yeah, no kidding. For listeners, internal rotation. So if you bring your knees like knee knock together, that's internal rotation. If you bring knees apart, that's external rotation. Just kind of a disclaimer. In general though, I think that's so interesting though, because being able to practice that, because then it's like you have more tools in the toolbox, just like with anything else, with stress management, with sleep management, all of those things. It's like we need to have more options, because sometimes you might think like, oh, this one was super comfortable during the class, so this is going to be the one that I'm going to go with. And then you are giving birth and you're like, this does not feel good, or like something in the like environment you're not able to, or different things like that. I had a friend talk about, like even for her, and I know it's been a little bit interesting in some of the hospitals, over the past kind of year with things being a little bit more limited. But like once she got hooked up to monitors, she wasn't able to walk around, and she was like, I just want to walk around, and like, so different things. So even just knowing that ahead of time, like you were saying, like if you want to be doing a little bit more labor at home and then going in, if you have kind of that concern that if something like that might happen, or like talking with your doctor, doula, like midwife, whoever that you're going to be giving birth with, of what really happens like as soon as I go to wherever I'm planning on giving birth, because you might picture like, oh, I'm going to have all this time and I can do this and I'm going to do this, and it might not happen. So being able to have those tools is so good.
Yeah, definitely. That's huge. That's one of the part of the birth prep classes. I have this handout that's just like questions to ask your birth team. And one of them is about intermittent auscultation, because that's so true. That's a huge thing that gets women staying in their bed, is like this always being monitored.
Yeah.
And just like, if the doctor wants to do that, just asking like, okay, do I have to? Is there another option? Is this just so, yeah, totally. It's just like giving them this like information that they can use with it. And before every class, I always tell them the partner and the birthing person, like, take what you want from this. You have permission to like close your ears when you want to. So yeah, absolutely.
That's so good.
I also wanted to share too, I have this really neat, can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. I found this really neat tool, because I think what like people they get all these tools and are like, oh, cool, I have all these tools in my toolbox. But then they're like, well, which one do I do like when? And there's this neat, it's called the labor coping scale. So it's this handout that can be used for the birth partner and the birthing person. And it's basically a way for them to communicate just using like numbers even. So instead of, maybe one of my patients was, or one of my birth prep participants was telling me that with her other deliveries, that when she started to scream, her husband started to like, freak out or, whatever. And he was just like, she's in a lot of pain. Let's do something about it. And so instead of them being like her having to, again, come into like frontal cortex and be like, no, I'm okay. There's this like just numbers that they can communicate with. Like, so it's giving him the ability to be like, okay, I hear you're screaming, but like, give me a number. Where are you at? And she could be like, I'm at a 4. And they know that like a 4 is I'm at a 6, whatever. And like, we know that a 4 is, they communicated beforehand that that's something that she's good with, right? Like maybe there's a number I'm just not good with. And actually the scale just gives you ideas of what to, so if your birth partner says, I'm at a 4, then you can kind of look at this diagram and be like, okay, she's at a 4. It's good for me to maybe prompt, moving positions or something. Right. So it just kind of gives the birth partner a little something to help so that they can feel a little bit more involved.
That's brilliant, because I think, I mean, I can only imagine that some of these partners are like, I don't know what to do. And they want to help, and they see like them giving birth and like just going through the labor and everything. And they're like, how can I help? And they're like, I have no idea. Like, I want to help, but you also seem really intense right now. Or like, what am I supposed to do? So that's so good. I'm going to start doing that with people.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's so good. So I want to transition a little bit, because I know so we've been talking a lot about some of the birth prep and labor prep and stuff like that. But also something that I know with your expertise and training of triathlons and being active yourself, that you really enjoy also working with women returning to fitness, return to exercise. So I would love to hear for like return to running. I mean, there's so much that goes into that. And that's one of my favorite things, is working with women on the return to exercise side of things as well. Which I think that's why we connect so much too. But with return to running, are there any things that you maybe like, I don't know if you can narrow it down to even like 3 things that you would recommend to a postpartum mom for return to running, if she's like 4 months postpartum, and kind of where to start on that?
Okay. Yeah. So that's a good question. So if I had a few tips, it's interesting. Like it would be very similar to if I saw them honestly at like 1 week postpartum, or maybe, I never see someone 1 week, I wish, but like if it was 6 weeks postpartum, I tend to, see breath patterns get really dysfunctional postpartum just because of the way that, the baby grows. And so learning how to reconnect with your breath is huge. I have a runner right now who she was leaking and she's postpartum, I think 10 months after her second. And we literally just got her breathing correctly. And that like fixed it all. So, really being able to reconnect with our breath is huge for our pelvic floor and for running, because running is a ton of pressure downwards. Another, thing that I work a lot with moms on is just getting them stronger, doing things that look like running. I think there's a lot of fear of like, I don't know what to do with exercise. Like I'm afraid of a diastasis. Like I am afraid of prolapse. I've heard of this thing called a prolapse. Like I'm just afraid of doing the wrong things. And so they end up doing nothing. And so, just really like empowering them that like, hey, you know what, actually getting stronger is going to help and going a little bit slow into this is going to help not sideline you in the long run. So like I do a lot of like single leg strengthening type of exercises. Even if it is even just starting in bird dog, if it's a single leg stance and RDL. So those are some things that I really work on with my moms as well. And then I just really always want to know what their goal. So like for the third thing, like I just want to know what their goal is. Like, do they want to get back into a triathlon, or like, do they want to just like be able to run after their kids? Like, I think understanding what they want to do is going to help me to just know how to like manipulate the activity that they're doing. So I think like I had a mom the other day that's like, I want to run because I heard that like it's going to help me lose weight. And I'm like, okay, like if that's your goal, like do we actually want to run? Like, do we want to run? Or so it's just like figuring out like I find that like having a specific goal tends to be really helpful. Not just like, should I run because I should, or like run because I want to lose weight. Right. Because we hear that a ton. Like, I just need to like lose this weight. And I'll actually throw in a fourth one.
Yeah, of course.
And this is just for like exercise in general, but it's definitely with runners or people wanting to jump back into running a lot quickly, is really like checking in with how is my sleep? How is my nutrition? Like, how is my support team? Like if my energy is like down already and I'm like really trying to amp up my running, I'm potentially setting myself up for something called red S, or it's used to be like it's essentially where I can get osteoporosis starting to occur in my body, and it's just because I don't have enough energy basically. So I'll pull from where I need it. So like almost similar to my triathlon story, where like I'm not doing a ton of triathlon specific exercise right now, but I'm like really setting myself up. Like I'm creating some space for myself to like be able to do this more intense activity. So really focusing on the nutrition, focusing on trying to get sleep when you can. And if you're already feeling like you're in a deficit, I don't know if running is necessarily, I mean, maybe it is, but like we need to check in and be really aware of those things, and really understand what our goal is. Like it kind of comes back to that too. So
that's great. Yeah. The recovery side of thing, we work with a lot of trail runners and endurance athletes and triathletes and stuff like that too. So that regardless of if they're a woman postpartum or if they're just an active adult, the recovery piece is so big, because I think people just automatically go into the training, which yes, you need to train to an extent, but the recovery is so important as well, that like you can't show up for those training runs or for the actual race without having those solid kind of foundational like key points of health and stuff like that, with the sleep, stress management and nutrition and all of that too. We love talking to our patients about that as well, because it's like such a big part to it. Like, yes, exercise is going to be important and like what we're working on. But if you think about all of the other things that you're doing within your day, even like information that you're consuming, who you're around and all of that, and with your mindset and everything like that is so, so important. And especially, I mean, I feel like for women during their pregnancy and postpartum to surround yourself with that village or whatever that looks like, that group of people that can help support you, whether that's in person or virtually or dropping things off or helping out in other ways. But I feel like for training for like marathons and triathlons and things like that, you need that team of people to help with that support. So that's so good.
Totally. It gets really tricky. So that team to check in with then is so key. Mm-hmm. So key.
That's awesome. So last question I have for you. But before we get to that, how can people connect with you, Dr. Jen, if they want to go to one of your classes or if they want to work with you, if they're living up in the Livermore area, or just in general connect with you? What's a good way for people to find you?
The best way to get a hold of me probably is through Instagram. I'm just at Embody Wellness PT. You could also email me. It's jenniferparker@embodywellnesspt.com. And then, if you actually go onto my Instagram, I have 2 little PDFs that you're welcome to download. One of them is actually I think it's 10 tips for returning back to running postpartum. And spoiler alert, none of them are actually running specifically. They're just all these things to help to get back into running. And then I also, the foundations. And then I also have a little PDF handout too for women who are looking for more exercise specific for when you're during pregnancy. Some things that kind of help to even start a little bit of birth prep work to kind of what's different. What are some things to look out for? And then maybe just some specific exercises that help for postpartum ultimately too, to start doing during pregnancy.
Beautiful.
As far as birth prep right now, I'm only offering it locally in Livermore. I'm doing it once a month right now. And the link it's on my Instagram page as well. And then I am though putting together a more virtual option as well. I'm hoping it'll be done by like the end of the month is kind of my goal. So the end of March. So I'll be able to reach more people with that. Cause I definitely get people messaging me like, I wish there was something like that locally here. So just putting that together for people too.
Beautiful. So I'll put all of that in the show notes so you guys can get connected with Dr. Jen. All right. So final question we got. So you are at your favorite local coffee shop, or you can pretend that you're down here in San Diego at one of them. And you're waiting in line and there's a new mom that's standing in line in front of you. And she turns around and cause she's like, oh, she looks really nice. I'm going to ask her some advice. So she goes, what advice would you have? Because I'm a new mom and I'm struggling with trying to stay healthy, but also find a new routine as a mother. What advice would you give to her?
Okay. So that's loaded.
I know. First, what are you going to order at the coffee shop? That's my first question.
Definitely a breakfast burrito.
Got to do it.
And probably an iced chai latte or something like that too, or dirty chai latte. So a mom that's looking to incorporate some new habits, it sounds like, or incorporate a new exercise program postpartum. So I definitely would encourage them to see if they can if we want to add something into our life, we have to create the space to do it. So, I think like understanding that if you want to get back into an exercise program, that's amazing. And if it isn't like right now happening, because of I am tired, again, all those things we talked about, even if I order a new pair of running shoes, like if I create a little space in my home that I have a yoga mat that I can kind of set out, even if it's like waking up 10 minutes earlier. I mean, it could really be the smallest thing. And just that 1% little change is going to help get you on that trajectory towards like that progress of where you want to go. So just really knowing that if you're going to start a new, again, habit, or like you're changing something in your life, it's in order for it to stick and stay, you kind of want it to be a little bit slow initially. And so understanding that even small little bits is a huge progress. Creating some space is amazing. It's amazing. And you're going to get to where you're going by just creating something like that and going that 1%, like 1% change. I say that all the time to people. Just 1% will get you're going the right way.
Oh, that's so good. I love that. Very, very good with like the small habits. That is fantastic. Well, Dr. Jen, I appreciate you so much for being on the show today and sharing your knowledge, because I feel like there's so much stuff that people are going to just be able to take from that and just at least look into more of like, oh, I have more options, and just being able to feel more empowered in their labor experience. So I appreciate that so much for taking the time today.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't wait for us to like actually be able to do this in person down in the coffee shop in San Diego.
I was just thinking about that. I'm like, oh yes, we need to plan that for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Postpartum Performance Podcast. I appreciate you taking the time to listen, learn, and grow. If this is your first time tuning in, thank you so much for being here. The aim of this podcast is to provide oodles of the best possible content to help empower women, eliminate the phrase, I wish I would have known sooner around pelvic health, and to encourage personal growth through the postpartum journey to becoming the best version of yourself. If you enjoyed the show and found the content helpful, please remember to subscribe to the podcast and leave a 5-star review. These subscriptions and reviews help other mothers discover the podcast. If you're a regular listener, thank you. I encourage you to tell a friend about us or post on social media sharing your favorite part for today's show. If you're looking for more content like this, please follow me on Instagram at Postpartum Performance. Remember, mothers, if you're seeking to live life strong, I'm here with you in your corner. Continue to be brave, stay strong, and live confidently.